From game day to signing day, breaking down every snap and all the news on Alabama's top football recruits. It's time for Crimson and Blue Chips with your host, John Garcia Jr.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome in to a fresh week of Crimson and Blue Chips. I'm your host, John Garcia Jr. If you missed it last week, we are now running 3 shows a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So this is our first Monday show in quite some time. We've got a lot to get to on this program, as you would imagine. Busy weekend with Alabama fall camp going on, and obviously Media Day Saturday created an opportunity to talk to some important figureheads in how this class, or how this year of 2018 is going to go on the field. Not only did Nick Saban speak, but we heard from Jalen Hurts, Tua Tagovailoa, Mike Locksley, more people than we can remember in such a short span. A lot of people were very curious how that would go over once the media was made aware that these quarterbacks would be available, and certainly Saturday created quite the grounds for Jalen Hurts to speak his mind and really open up for the first time since the championship game. He's been kind of censored since that point, so he had a lot to say, and he certainly let it fly, and we're going to play the full audio that we captured of Jalen Hurts over the weekend. We'll hear from Charlie Potter of 24/7 Sports at BamaOnLine. He was there interviewing Jalen, so he has kind of a unique perspective on it, and we go really in depth on the quarterbacks, of course, as well as other topics with Alabama's fall camp, of course, underway. And then you'll hear from Tua Tagovailoa as well, and then Q&A to wrap it all up. So a busy Monday edition of Crimson and Blue Chips coming at you right now.
I'm just worried about me, Jalen Hurts being the best player that I can be, being the best quarterback that I can be.
Summer like for you, the offseason?
I think it's been a lot. There's been a lot of rumors, a lot of speculation about things that have gone on this summer. And the funny part for me is it's just a lot of people that have made decisions for me. And it's actually good to see y'all guys. I kind of feel like they've been hiding from y'all. But there's been a lot going on, a lot of things being said. Everybody has something to say. Everybody has an opinion, but the funniest thing about all of it is I've never said a thing. I'm in my clothes, didn't say anything to anyone, and in regards to people believing the things that are said, it's hard to believe something from somebody that the number one source didn't say anything. So.
Can you take us through your conversation with Nick about that you're going to stay?
Well, that was kind of taken out of proportion as well, because it wasn't a conversation. It didn't go like that. I actually went and talked to him about his comments on it. He didn't know if I'd be here for the first game. And we had a conversation about that, and I was kind of shocked that he said that. But me coming at him and trying to see what was going on and all that, then I told him, and I told him in June that I'd be here. I mean, it was never a decision that needed to be made in regards to me leaving. That was something that the kind of general media placed on me, and something that I never said. So with that, I told him, I said, like I told you, I'll be here, and then I'm about to graduate in January, so I leave. Even when I'm not in a situation where I think I should leave, I'm here. But why do that when you're 15 hours away from graduation?
What's been your reaction to some of the talk on the outside, whether it's from fans or media, even just kind of making up their mind on who's going to win?
I just brush it off. Like I said, it's funny to me. It's all silly. I mean, that's the world we live in. It's the reality of it. Like I said, ever since the championship game, people have counted me out. People have said I'm going to go to Texas or go here, whatever it is. Alumni have said that. I mean, the list goes on. But regardless of what people say, I'm still here. And as far as I'm concerned, my job is to be the best quarterback I can be, and that's what I strive to do every day.
So you were surprised when things were worded how they were in media days?
Yeah, I'd say so. And the spring has been so, it did. But for me, like I said, I was kind of like, I'm not saying anything. So for me, when I look at the things that are being said, and I'm not looking for it, it just comes to me. And see that those things are being said. that's silly because he said this, he said that, maybe Coach Saban said this, whoever said whatever, what did Jalen say? Not a thing.
Did you want to say something, I think, during this whole time to kind of clarify your opinion?
Well, I think, like I said, they didn't want me to talk for whatever reason. I get the opportunity to speak now, and I mean, I've always tried to handle situations like this and handle speaking the best way that I can, because at the end of the day, I'm representing myself and I'm representing my family back home.
What was your use of social media, though? I mean, you could have, in some ways, did that. Was that also kind of explicitly told to you that maybe you shouldn't post something on social media to kind of answer some of these questions?
Well, I think it's something that I mean, this is a situation that is uncontrollable. Coaches can't control the situation. They'll dictate who plays. As far as other variations to it, they don't control it, honestly. Like I said, this whole spring, ever since the game, they kind of wanted to let it play out, but they kind of, didn't think it was a thing, or tried to let it die down like it wasn't something there. There's always been an elephant in the room. It's like, for me, no one came up to me the whole spring, coaches included. No one asked me how I felt. No one asked me what was on my mind. No one asked me, I felt about the things that were going on. Nobody asked me what my future entailed, and that's that. So now it's like when we trying to kind of handle the situation now, for me, it's kind of late. It's too late. The narrative has already been created.
Was that a problem that you didn't get that kind of response, or even that inquiries from your coaches or anybody on the team? Is that an issue for you?
I think as a player, you definitely want to feel some concern from your coach, I guess, but I don't necessarily think they were not concerned, because they're definitely concerned. I just don't think that they were maybe bold enough to ask. Like it was I know it's done to talk about it. And I definitely think it was something that should have been talked about a long time ago, instead of being talked about when it's hit. It's like kind of like a stove. But after that game, the stove got turned on, the heat got turned up. And it's like, okay, now we put the pot on the stove, now we put the food on the stove, now the food's cooking, right? And come the season when it officially starts, the food will be done.
How does your mindset change from the championship game, where you're, very diplomatic, very complimentary of what was going on, and then now, based on all the stuff that's transpired since then?
Well, like I said, I know I have a lot of supporters. I have a lot of followers, and I have a lot to me at all times. And with the success that I've had in the first 2 years, I've built a brand for myself, and I've tried to represent this university in the best way that I can. Stable, make good grades,
thank you, Jalen.
Doing all those things. So
that's it.
Guys, everybody else is out here.
Now joining us for the first time on Crimson and Blue Chips, a guy I've followed for a very long time, probably longer than he realizes. Really one of the key cogs at BamaOnLine, the Alabama empire over there at 24/7 Sports, my colleagues to some degree. But Charlie Potter going to debut with us. Charlie, a lot going on this weekend, more than I thought would have gone on this weekend. But when Nick Saban made Jalen Hurts and Tua Tagovailoa available, I know as a beat writer and as the beat writer, your ears had to perk up. But you also said, man, this is probably going to be something, because it's just something we hadn't seen. But maybe even then, did it turn out to be more than you thought it would be on Saturday?
It did. I knew the quarterbacks were going to be making their debut, I guess, for the 2018 season or fall, and then the message was conveyed to everybody else Friday after Nick Saban's initial press conference of fall camp, and you could tell everybody just kind of got a little antsy, just because we've been talking about quarterbacks all off season long, and you just kind of as someone that provides content for a website, that's going to do a lot of traffic, and that's something that a lot of people want to hear about and read about. that's just your expectations going into it, is that you got to get that and be there for that. But, I decided, myself and Kirk McNair decided to split up the quarterbacks. And like you said, I didn't really anticipate getting what we got out of Jalen, just because he's just kind of been low-key, quiet to the point with his answers. But he had something to say Saturday. And, he's been, kept quiet, all year. Even whenever he was at the Manning Passing Academy over the summer, he was the only quarterback there that didn't talk. And now he had an opportunity to be in front of a lot of cameras, for everybody that follows Alabama football and really for, the college football world. And like I said, he had a message to convey.
Yeah, it's almost like he took a page out of Saban's book to some degree with that steered thought. But yeah, obviously those listening, you kind of heard the sound there. I was surprised to hear it that way. Did it come off to you, Charlie, having been literally right in front of him? Did it come off as more of a, hey, don't forget about me, I'm still kind of the guy, or did it come off as something different? What was it? Or I guess what I'm asking is, was this out of character, in your opinion, of Jalen because of how he's been? Or is this kind of the maturation, evolution of Jalen Hurts heading into, I guess, time as an upperclassman technically on this Alabama roster?
It was out of character. He's a guy, like I said, that you kind of stuck to script. Before, he's a guy that was to the point with his answers. Something that he said a lot is he just wanted to improve. And but this was something, it's like he wanted to get it off his chest. And I know, you look at, the media world out there and you see just snippets of this, whether it's on Twitter, Instagram, on TV, things like that, people aggregating it. A lot of what he said, you need the full quote to really get it. I don't think it was as negative as some people took it to be. I went into it knowing I was going to write a story about Jalen. And as soon as I was done, I knew immediately that I was just going to basically do it Q&A style and put all of his quotes on there, because I knew that this was something that he had been thinking about. And, it is in a situation where there's been a lot of people talking for Jalen, whether it's his dad, whether it was Nick Saban at SEC Media Days, which is something that he pointed out. And then whether it's just people in the media, people in the fan base already making up their minds about the quarterback competition. And, he wanted to throw his hat in the ring. And I think really there were a couple things that stood out to me, making that a point that there's a lot of rumors, a lot of speculation, and making that about his future and being gone this summer, and saying that he never said any of that. And then talking about what Nick Saban said at SEC Media Days when he was asked if he thought that Jalen would be on the team's roster for Game 1, and saying he didn't know. He basically said that he went to Saban and asked him why he said that, because his quote was, I told you already that I'd be here in credits 15 hours away from graduating. And so that to me is the biggest thing that he said, is he just kind of felt that his value, maybe not necessarily value, but Jalen as the person wasn't, his view and how he felt about things wasn't being considered. And, I think that the biggest thing from that is, even when I'm not in the situation where I think I should be, I'm still here. And, he had a lot to say. And it was different. They weren't short answers like we've seen before. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. We always want to see these guys kind of open up and, kind of go off script a little bit. And that's what we got. And I think the people that kind of broke those quotes up and used them, that did a disservice to Jalen. And, that's something that is going to probably lead to a fiery Nick Saban press conference later this week.
Yeah, I was going to say, and this is Charlie Potter, joining in Crimson and Blue Chips for the first time at Charlie_Potter on Twitter, of course, a part of the BamaOnLine family. I was going to say, because of, I guess, the surprise, and I think everybody was surprised at least a little bit with how it went down on Saturday, is this now the last time you expect to hear from Jalen and or Tua the rest of camp? Was this a one-and-done scenario like all the way, or do you think now it's a one-and-done scenario and we may not hear from these guys until next month?
Yeah, I mean, I think the fact that that we were told, hey, the quarterback's going to be here. You're going to get 7 to 8 minutes with them, and then the rest of the players are there, and you can do whatever. I think going into it, I knew that they weren't going to be available again in camp, but I also think that now, looking back and hearing what Jalen said, we will never hear from Jalen again. Until the postseason. Like if he's available, say they make the SEC championship, that locker room's open, and of course any bowl or playoff games, the locker rooms are open. They usually have a media day for that. If he's still here, and he sounds like he's going to be. But yeah, I mean, as soon as that happened, I knew that was probably the last time that in the sense that Alabama controlled it, that we would ever hear from Jalen Hurts again. And I think he probably knew that too, and that's why he wanted to get it out like he did.
Yeah, it seems like he was kind of gunning for it. And even at the end there, and for those who listened all the way till the end, you could hear the communications representative for UA kind of ending him mid answer for that last question about how he's represented the school and things like that. Was it just a timing thing, or did you think that even the representative kind of got a sense of, oh goodness, this is going to go viral, and Nick might not be happy with it?
No, I mean, I know the SID that said it, and I think he just thought that Jalen was done. They had kind of they announced one more question or last question a lot of times, and they said that, and usually whenever there's any kind of pause, they wrap it up, and with a sense that we had on Saturday with the quarterbacks being out there and being the focal points, they wanted to wrap them up and in the tunnel and then out for the team picture and in for practice. And I wouldn't look too much into that. And really, I know there's been a lot made of this. I wouldn't make too much of Jalen's comments. I know that I wasn't expecting the quarterbacks to be made available, but I do think that Jalen had a lot to do with that. I think he wanted to say this, and I think that now that he's got this off his chest, if he's not in the doghouse with Saban for it, then that's one less thing for him to worry about. And I know I thought he looked good out at practice. Tua did too. They split reps with the ones. I know we'll probably talk about that a little bit moving forward, but I think he and everybody else is happy to have this behind them, even though. With Saban speaking Wednesday and having a scrimmage this week, I'm sure this isn't the last we've heard of this.
Yeah, for sure. And I thought, moving on to kind of what Nick Saban said later in the weekend, it sounds like he's more and more open to the possibility of two guys. And I know that's not the most popular thing in the world. And like he said, he thinks we in the media are thinking there has to be a starter and there has to be a backup. So maybe he's going against that just to go against the media, or maybe he's legitimately looking at these two guys. I guess my question to you, Charlie, having covered it literally every step of the way, have you become kind of more open to that as a possibility? Do you see that as a possibility, or do you think it'll be more conventional? Hey, this guy gets the lion's share, and this guy, gets some other share, even though it might not be evenly proportioned or anything like that.
I think it's going to be that way early on just because we've seen these competitions drag out. I think that could be the case. I'm not necessarily saying that's how it's going to be. Like I've said all offseason long that I wouldn't be surprised to see Jalen Hurts take the first snaps against Louisville just because that's kind of how we've seen these things shake out in the past. But watching that open practice after media day, and seeing that, Tua, if I had to break it down, Tua probably took 60 to 65% of the first team reps, and Jalen took the other portion of that. And, if that continues to be the case, and if Tua, shows what he showed in the second half of the national championship game, then, I wouldn't be surprised if he's a starting quarterback. Nick Saban was asked during that press conference that we're talking about, if he has looked into playing both quarterbacks this fall, and he said we haven't done it at all. And, he's talked about finding a role for both guys, but playing, two quarterbacks all season long, I don't think that's something that they anticipate because they'd like to see somebody go out there, win the team, win the job. I could see maybe a situation where, Jalen comes in, in short yardage situations, but you're also tilting your hand there. So it's going to be very interesting to see how they handle this. He said that he wants to find a role. Or if it's possible to find a role for both guys, and who knows what that means when he says that. But It's a hypothetical thing, and that's something Nick Saban himself says he doesn't like to talk about. So it becomes a little bit of a gray area when you get into that.
Having seen these guys again up close, and this will be my last quarterback question, I promise. I know we need to move on. But, having seen these guys up close, we've asked recruits who have more access than us a lot of times. We ask, college gurus, quarterback gurus, whatever, everybody we can, kind of the differences between these guys at different settings, different throwing sessions, etc., where they've been on the field together. Have you seen a progression from the perceived weakness, comparatively, of Jalen Hurts' arm from at some point last year to right now? Whether it's consistency, accuracy, downfield ability, kind of the typical knocks from the Team Tua crowd of the wonderfully depth Alabama fan base.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, watching the quarterbacks yesterday, or I guess it's Saturday now, they both looked pretty good. They both threw interceptions. Shaheem Carter had a good day and was able to pick off all three quarterbacks. But Jalen, had some really nice throws in the workout. He had one of the ones that I saw. You're not able to see every throw because they basically got the field split and are doing things on both sides. But one of the ones I saw was a deep ball to Henry Ruggs, to the pylon during 7-on-7 drills, and it was a perfectly placed ball over his shoulder. And that's there's coverage there. There's 7-on-7 drills, and so I'm not going to go out there and say that Jalen's just shown a lot of progress, because we all have said that it seems like every off season, and we've seen kind of the same old things crop up. But he's certainly a capable passer. A lot of people will even say that Jalen has a stronger arm than Tua. But the thing that Tua has more so over Jalen, and it's pretty obvious in the times we've seen him on the field, it's his uncanny accuracy. And, whether it's Trent Dilfer, the experts that have seen him, they talk about how rare and kind of a once-in-a-generation arm that he has. And that's something that's going to be tough for Jalen to beat. He also, Tua, has the ability to move the chains with his legs. And I think that's just ultimately why everybody thinks that the competition isn't necessarily over, and we could see this thing drag out into maybe week one or going into SEC play. But at the end of the day, I think everybody knows or believes that Tua will be the quarterback just because of the talent that he has and the talent he's already shown.
I think that's well said from Charlie Potter, joining us for the first time on CABC. I know you've gotten a million questions about that, and even I have, and I don't even cover the team full time like you do. So God bless you. Moving to some of the other really important situations going down on this team as camp opens. A whole lot of vacancies on defense, particularly that back seven, whether it's inexperience or just flashes. When you talk about guys like Deontay Thompson, Mack Wilson, we hadn't seen a lot of guys back there put a full season together wearing crimson and white. You mentioned Shaheem Carter, but just back seven in general, linebackers, DBs, who are some guys that either on the hoof look like they're well positioned, or in drills, or like you said, even in some practice reps early on that seem like they're either validating the hype or maybe kind of being in store for a surprise run as this thing gets deeper and deeper?
Well, right now, it looks like that if Alabama were to play a game today, the same defense that we saw in the spring would be what we see out on the field. Obviously minus Terrell Lewis, who suffered an ACL injury. But, with the secondary, you look at guys, and I'm going to talk about the nickel package because that's primarily what Alabama works at. But we've seen some moving parts between base and nickel and dime. But at left corner, you had Trayvon Diggs. Right corner, you had Savion Smith. Shaheem Carter was working in the slot, but he also worked at right corner in base. And at safety, Deontay Thompson and Xavier McKinney. And those guys have played well. They are relatively inexperienced, but you kind of roll down the list there, and Trayvon and Shaheem are going to be juniors this fall. Deontay Thompson is in his fourth year as a redshirt junior. So they're guys that have been in the program. And I think when you're looking at that, looking at them and the linebackers in front of them, Mac Wilson and Dylan Moses, who I think could be, all SEC and potentially All-American candidate players at that position if they stay healthy. They have the talent. It's just the experience isn't there because of how much Alabama lost this offseason, how many players are on NFL training camp rosters right now. And, I think if these guys can stay healthy, that's probably the group that we're going to see to start this season against Louisville. But, Alabama also signed a lot of talented young players. We saw Patrick Surtain Jr. and Josh Jobe kind of shadowing a couple of guys. Jobe was behind Diggs at left corner, and Surtain, who a lot of people, fair or not, have been comparing him to Minka Fitzpatrick. He was behind Shaheem Carter at that star role whenever they were working on first-team defense. And, these guys were brought in for a reason, to provide depth and to compete, and that's exactly what they're going to do. So Alabama has some options, but I think if you're looking for a little bit of mix-up or experimentation, right now they're kind of sticking with what they had in the spring, and so far it's been working.
Looking at the linebackers in particular, Charlie, obviously, again, inexperience, lack of depth to some degree. Is there kind of a breakout candidate there? Do you think there's a potential glue guy if something does happen to Mac or Dylan among the inside linebackers? You mentioned the freshmen in the secondary. What about those guys at the second level? I mean, who's kind of the, I guess I don't want to say sleeper because these guys play at Alabama, but is there a guy or two you think if the cards fall the right way can make an impact more than maybe we're talking about, as of August 6th?
Yeah, I think at linebacker, I mean, it starts with Mac and Dylan, and, they're going to be the starters. They're going to be on the field all the time. But a guy that they really need to step up is Markel Benton. He's somebody that redshirted last year, but has been mentioned by Mac, by Nick Saban, by Tosh Luboy, as someone that they're, working on to try to learn this defense. I think if it came down to it in an emergency situation, they could maybe throw a guy like Joshua McMillan in the game because he's been in the program for so long. But I think they're really trying to groom Markel Benton for that role. There's been a lot of mention of true freshman Jalen Moody, too, who's kind of surprised in his short time on campus. I don't know if he's necessarily ready for that, but with what happened to the linebackers last year, you got to get everybody ready. And, that's even including the true freshmen. But in the secondary, somebody that I think that doesn't get mentioned a lot, I think who could be a guy that comes on in that dime package at safety, even maybe Xavier McKinney moving down to money, Jared Maiden. And that's someone that, you mentioned the guys that we've already talked about, but he's one that kind of gets left out of that group. And I think he's someone that can kind of step into his own. It looks like he's added a lot of muscle, mass this offseason. And he's someone that's been in the program, learned the system, and now have an opportunity if he's able to hold off those young guys. That's going to be something to watch in the secondary, is holding off those young guys. But I think Benton and Maiden are guys that maybe don't get talked about a lot, but we'll probably see the field a decent amount this fall.
There you go, Charlie Potter. Before we let you go, offensively, I think the O-line, I think everyone can agree that it's kind of going to look good on paper no matter which five guys roll out there September 1. But where are the real battles there, and who are the candidates, Charlie? Because I don't know, it seems like there's 12 O-linemen that you can throw out there that have some type of shot to play some type of position. It seems like there's half the positions are locked and half have a million guys competing. Where do you see as the real battles on the O-line, despite so much talent there that, no matter who wins, it's going to be a pretty solid group?
Yeah, I mean, I think Jonah Williams at left tackle and Ross Birchbaker at center are the locks. And then I think there's, 4, maybe 5 players kind of competing for those other 3 spots. And I think the biggest ones at right tackle with Alex Leatherwood and Matt Womack. Womack is someone that started all 14 games last year, but he missed all of spring with a foot injury. Now he's back healthy and full go for camp. And, we've seen Leatherwood kind of maintain that first team spot. He worked there all day Saturday with the ones, but Womack is someone that obviously they feel comfortable enough to put in a starting role. And then you look at the guys that were at guard. Lester Cotton is at left guard. Jedrick Wills is at right. And you throw those two in there with Leatherwood and Womack, you can maybe mix that group up kind of like musical chairs, and there's 4 of them, and just kind of wherever one or 3 of them land, and you could probably make it work just because they're versatile guys that can move around. Wills can play tackle. We've seen Cotton play tackle. It remains to be seen if Leatherwood and Womack can play guard. But we've heard them mentioned with the versatility aspect, and then maybe you could throw a veteran like Joshua Catcher in there as well. We saw him begin the spring with a first-team offense, but I think it's a handful of guys competing for those first-team spots. There's some talent behind them. Scott Lashley, Deontay Brown. They've been working with that second group, and obviously they got a couple newcomers, but it's kind of the usual suspects. The unit that we saw in the spring, Williams, Cotton, Pierce Baker, Wills, and Leatherwood is who we've seen start camp. And I think Womack's obviously the wild card to see what happens with him. But I do think I agree with you that the offensive line on paper looks to be really good and could be a strength of this team and the offense this fall.
I was talking to the show's producer. His name's Kevin. We call him Producer Kev, Charlie. And we were talking about the quarterback thing again because, that's like an everyday thing now. But we were saying, man, whoever wins or whatever they do, how about the O-line and the running back? I mean, it's a pretty good fallback, even though nobody's talking about it. It looks like the running game could be, one of the best in the country if they want it to be. So in one light, it may not totally matter who that guy is, just for arguments purposes. But when we talked about them, the O-line and the running backs, I said, man, nobody talks about Josh Jacobs anymore. Do you have a reason for that, Charlie? Do you know why you talked about Jared Maiden on defense, and it kind of reminded me of another Midlands guy, Oklahoma, Texas guy, in Josh Jacobs. It's like, dude had a great freshman season, banged up a little bit as a sophomore, but still contributed as a runner and receiver. I mean, is it because there's so much attention on the quarterbacks, and then when you get to running backs, everyone thinks, oh, Damian Harris, stability, whatever. Why doesn't Josh Jacobs, I guess, get the love, at least from where I sit?
I think it's a couple of things. Last year he kind of went through some injuries. In the spring, he didn't play at all because of an ankle injury. And you do have Damian Harris coming back. He's kind of the focal point. And then the young guys, Najee Harris and Brian Robinson. That's kind of the situation, a similar one to what Jared Maiden's going through. He was once a recruit, a new face coming in. Everybody was talking about, and then you just get that new crop behind you, and that's kind of what happens. Obviously, a lot of people were expecting big things from Najee Harris. I think he's probably going to be the number 2 back. But I think Josh Jacobs is going to fill a similar role that he filled last year, kind of that change of pace, third down back. And if he's healthy, he can really be a dangerous weapon out of the backfield, whether it's in the running game or the passing game. And, that's something, which you talked about at the beginning. The running back group, Mike Loxley said, is probably the strength of the offense. And, with those 4 that we've been talking about, he said that he would be an idiot to not find ways to get those guys involved in the offensive system. And I think you're right about the quarterbacks. With the offensive line and the potential it has, and with this strong group of running backs, they can stay healthy. Throw in those talented receivers that are returning and the Provincetown newcomers that'll be out there. This offense, has potential to be really dangerous. And I do think that the running game, led by that offensive line and these running backs, and Josh Jacobs, we have to mention him because he doesn't get enough publicity. I think he could be really dangerous.
Yeah, you actually led me into kind of the final question I have for you, Charlie. Having been able to speak with the quarterbacks was such a focal point, but some of the coaches were able to speak to the media really for the first time of late, including the coordinators. What did you gather from Mike Loxley? I think, again, there's been so much focus with the quarterbacks that we almost forget, hey, there's a new OC in town too. So we wonder how that much could factor into the discussion. But what did you kind of gather just from sitting down, talking to him, just about whether it was philosophy, plans, personnel, et cetera?
Well, he didn't want to talk about the quarterbacks that much, or at least the competition, and kept saying it. Yeah, kept saying it was going to be Nick Saban's decision, which I don't think anybody would argue with that. But just hearing, how he's going to handle, being an offensive coordinator and not having a position to coach. That's something that's, new to Alabama because of the new rule with a 10th assistant. And Alabama has a quarterbacks coach now with Danny O's, and that's usually a position that the offensive coordinator has held, being a coordinator and QB coach. And he kind of said it's kind of like the NFL model and how he's able to devise the game plan and break down film, and then kind of go to different position rooms and fix what's needed. And obviously he said he spends a lot of time in that quarterback room and has a good relationship with Enos. They work really well together. But he's leading the charge of the entire unit, and he broke down the offense of obviously talking about how the running backs can be a strength, how they have 4 returning starters on the offensive line and the trio of young receivers that he coached last year, and then 2 quarterbacks that are going to continue to compete. And he's a guy that has a lot of weapons at his disposal, and he doesn't really have a position group to worry about. So he has all the time in the world to devise ways to get all these playmakers involved, and we'll see how he's going to do that this fall.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, so many storylines we could hit with Charlie Potter, but we will let him retire, at least for the moment, from his debut right here on CABC. Again, guys, follow him at Charlie_Potter, and of course, look for his work daily at BamaOnLine.com. Hope we didn't keep you too long there, but we do appreciate your time.
No problem, man. Thanks for having me.
There was Jalen Hurts. There was Charlie Potter. Let's get you over to Tua Tagovailoa for his comments on Saturday at Media Day on the quarterback competition, kind of his viewpoint, and much more.
Any issues with the hand? No. I'm getting better with it. As far as last month.
When were you full strength?
This month, yes, sir.
How were you in the spring? How did that feel when you were practicing during the spring?
As far as my hand?
Yeah.
I mean, everything was good up until the point where I ended up injuring it, but
Probably having a missed spring?
I mean, yeah, yes and no. It gave me a good amount of time to rest and just focus mentally on plays and focus on protections and whatnot. I think it was kind of a good, but at the same time, I learned a lot better doing, than just watching something.
How much has your life changed? The last 8 months, 9 months since the championship?
I mean, it's definitely changed a lot. I think that goes for anyone who's in the spotlight or whatnot, and who nobody really knows about it, performs in a big situation. So, I think that's, it's changed, and I think that goes for anyone that at least decent on a big stage.
So, what would you like to take that to your game to the next level and maybe thanks your focus?
You said, what would I?
Yeah, what number one thing that you'd like to do?
I think everyone has a lot of things to do on, but for me, I'd say my biggest thing, my relationship with my teammates. We have a lot of younger guys, and helping out a lot of the younger guys, getting to understand plays, getting to understand, how everything works around here, getting them kind of going within our system. I think that's going to help us better, not only each other, but better ourselves as a team.
Who are some of the young receivers that have impressed you so far?
We've had our receivers from last year, our freshman group from last year. Now we're sophomore. Jalen Waddle has been a really good asset to us as well. We have Xavier Marks as well. So I think we'll be fine as far as what we can do at our receiver.
Outside Tua, what do you have to do to win the job?
What do I have to do to win the job? For me, I'm not really focused on winning the job. I don't think that's ever been in my persona. I think what we have to do as a team is what's most important to me. We got to focus on what we can do now to better each other. As the season goes on, we'll see and whatnot. But we're just focused on trying to better ourselves as a team, preparing for the first game, and just looking at how we can identify ourselves this year.
Has it felt weird or uncomfortable or awkward or anything for you in feeling knowing that there's so much talk that's going to get better on the field?
Nothing. We don't talk about any quarterback controversies at practice. Me and Jalen don't even bring it up. As far as this season, we're just looking at getting each other better. There's no negative contingencies. We don't go into games thinking I mean, thinking I might not start. I'm going to go into this game and I'm going to throw a pick. No negative contingencies. We want to be positive. Because the team looks at that. The team looks at what we say. At the media as well. And so, I mean, I just don't want anything, to ruin our relationship and whatnot. And I don't think anything between me and Jalen is bad. So,
how much have you learned from Daniels as far as quarterback?
Oh, I mean, we've learned a lot. It's a lot different now than last year. Last year we didn't really have a certified specific position coach, and now that we do, it gives us the opportunity to have someone really, hone in and focus in on just our position. Every little thing he corrects us on.
So, did you think that when you was over in Hawaii and talked at the middle school that was going to take off the way it did about your mindset if you didn't play in national championship? Did you think that was going to like that kind of national attention when it was discussed?
I think it was taken out of context, but I mean at the same time that was in May and whatnot. This is what we're trying to focus on now. It's our football season ahead and today's practice. Football camp. So
you talked about not a two quarterback system. You didn't use that term, but now utilizing everybody who can tell. Is that the way you understand?
I think that's the way we all need to look at it. We've had many speakers, in the past, and we had a speaker last night, and his name is Eric Thomas, and I know a lot of people know Eric Thomas, and he talked about the difference between someone who's a beast and someone who's a winner. But right now we're a team that wins. We're known as winners. But what separates you from being a beast and a winner is beasts don't complain about what they don't get or what they can't get, because it's something that's going to happen in the end result for them. Winners, it's almost like it's given to them. It's like some people didn't have to work for their height. Some people didn't have to work for their weight. It's kind of like it was written for you to be a winner. And so I'd say that's kind of honed into the team that whatever's going to help benefit the team is going to be what's right. And Coach Saban and his coaching staff make the best decision for us.
So there you go. If you missed both quarterbacks over the weekend like I did, I was at a wedding, you caught up pretty quickly. And obviously you see kind of where things stand. And as we talked with Charlie about interesting comments from Jalen, I kind of agree with Charlie. I think the negativity coming out of it, a little bit blown out of proportion. The kid had a platform, the kid had a plan, clearly, and he let it out. So we'll see how that looks moving forward. I think Jalen was very clear to be discussing the past up to the present and not necessarily moving forward. I don't think it was a fall camp conversation. I don't think some of that stuff will carry over to fall camp. But y'all know how it is nowadays with sensationalism in the media and all those things. Any little thing's going to be blown up. Nobody's putting down what Tua said because Tua played it down the middle, right? He played it like you would think an Alabama quarterback would play it. And I think Jalen spoke much more from the heart, although it seemed pretty darn calculated as well. So he wanted to get a message out there, much like his head coach. But for the remainder of today's program, we're going to kick it with you guys, as we typically do here, Q&A style. As you can see on our nice simulcast, we're going to kick it off with Raphael Monroy right here. He says, hope all is well. It's finally here. Can't wait to see and hear how the incoming freshmen are doing in camp. Who are you the most excited to see in pads at full speed? What kind of fallout do you see from the Ohio State mess? Any decommits coming? Roll Tide Roll from Long Island, New York. Of course, that's Raphael Monroy kicking us off. I think I'm excited to see a lot of young kids. I think Charlie hit on some of the top ones. Pat Surtain Jr., certainly one I've been looking forward to hearing and seeing more about. Josh Jobe in the defensive backfield. How about Jalen Moody? Kind of surprising early on. Definitely didn't expect him to be mentioned a ton or at all this early in camp. Iyabi Anoma's a guy, once he is fully healthy, we expect to hear a lot from among the freshmen. I think Jalen Waddle offensively is probably the main guy who we expect to hear from, a young group of wide receivers. He's got return ability as well, so you just wonder how a guy like that can be used in an offense, regardless of the offensive coordinator or situation. Um, so I think he's a guy we'll hear more from moving forward. We heard Tua mentioning Jalen as a young guy who's impressed him to this point. So those are kind of the young guys I'm really keeping an eye on. And then second-year guys, I mean, linebacker, there's a lot of opportunity. The secondary, there's a lot of opportunity as well. So we'll see who can kind of step up. And don't forget about, some of the top guys who did play a little bit as freshmen. What about LeBron Ray? He's a guy that I think has a chance to be a big-time contributor and maybe even break out in 2017. So it is that time of year. Regardless of the controversy, if you want to call it that, there's a lot of storylines going on right now with Alabama. So young guys will have plenty of opportunity. As far as the Ohio State situation, I saw this question come in, I believe, last week on Friday. I didn't get to it on the pod, but I kind of wanted to let the weekend marinate, if you will. I just don't know if this is a situation that's going to lead to Urban Meyer's firing. I don't know that that's the case. I do know a lot of recruits are waiting it out. And I think it's early enough, early August, where kids can wait it out and it not necessarily hurt Ohio State on their end. Now, when you look at some of the facts with Urban, and I'm not going to go way into this, but when you do look at some of the facts on the Florida days, and certainly even the Ohio State days to some degree, other people in these kids' camps may begin to form an additional opinion that could then influence the kids. If you do believe Urban Meyer has been lying, and there's obviously some documentation to support that belief, then I could see it impacting the camps more than the kids, if that makes sense. Because the kids are going to go off of what they always do, their own experience, their own interactions with Urban and his staff, as they do with every coaching staff. So I think maybe not the kids so much, but the camps, the high school coaches, the parents especially, there is where I think you could see an impact. And as far as Ohio State's commitment list, there's not a lot of big-time Alabama targets there at this point from what we can tell. So I don't think there's going to be a lot of overlap in terms of, any type of floodgates opening in Alabama taking advantage, at least from where we see it on August 6th, 2018. Luke Ferguson with a question in that we missed on Friday. With Christian Harris committing to Texas A&M, does Henry To'oTo'o become an even more important recruit, or they only taking two inside? Good question, Luke. I don't know what the final number is going to be inside. Shane Lee's verbally committed right now. We know Nakobe Dean is a take him whenever he's ready type of kid. So we don't necessarily know when we'll know that final number of inside backers. But I tend to think two is the floor. I do think there could be room for three. I think there could be room for another one. So that's where a guy like Henry To'oTo'o becomes a possibility. There's a potential transfer possibility that I know we'll be asked about here soon that could impact that number, I believe. So that's a little bit fluid, but I do think there's some clear separation here because, look, Shane Lee's on board. He's very solid. Nakobe Dean's not deciding until December. So in between, if there's an inside linebacker who emerges that Alabama's willing to take, I do believe that they will take him, and we know To'oTo'o is unafraid about leaving the West Coast. Carl Lensner chiming in with a question here. Good morning, John. What committed wide receivers is Alabama trying to flip besides George Pickens? I don't know. I don't think it's a heavy group. I think wide receiver is going to be a little bit smaller in this class for Alabama. I do believe that Alabama's in good shape because, one, you got one committed in John Mechie. Your tight end recruit, Jaleel Billingsley, plays a little bit more like a wide receiver right now. DeMarco Hellams, the safety commitment Alabama has from Washington, D.C., has a ton of wide receiver experience, so I think that could factor in as well. But George Pickens is kind of A1, right? Pickens is the top dog. I think Devontae Lee is another wide receiver candidate, but he's uncommitted. Some think he's going to play defense at the next level. I think Bama's being pretty conservative and fairly slow right now at the wide receiver position. Jamison Williams is another uncommitted recruit, I think, at receiver that it's got a legitimate shot for. So I don't think the flip game is going to be heavy with wide receiver talk beyond George Pickens at this point, at least from where I'm gathering information right now on August 6th. But don't make the mistake. George Pickens is being heavily pursued by Alabama. So I don't know if there's speculation out there that to the contrary, but as far as we know, Bama is heavy over George Pickens, and they're trying to get him back on campus as much as possible. And with him being less than an hour away from school, having an Alabama commit on his team and Will Reichard, those things are in Alabama's favor. So I would imagine he does take at least another trip or two to Tuscaloosa before all is said and done. But obviously, going to be a tough flip from Auburn, FSU, Georgia, among those trying to do what Alabama's trying to do. More from Carl here. Good morning, John. Why do you not give Tua any credit for looking off the safety in the Georgia game on the winning touchdown? Didn't that have something to do with the blown coverage? Yeah, Carl, I'm pretty sure I give Tua credit for that. Now, the overall composition of the play, the blown coverage wasn't the safety. The safety got looked off and couldn't get back to the play side in time, which obviously is a hat tip to Tua for his throw, ball placement, velocity, Devontae Smith's angle in running that route during that play, Seattle, as Alabama calls it, for Verts. But the blown coverage wasn't with Dominic Sanders, the safety. The blown coverage was with, I believe it was Malcolm Parrish, the cornerback, basic cover two, whether it was two-man or traditional cover two. That outside corner has to get his hands on one. The one is the most outside threat facing you, and it was Devontae Smith on the left side for Alabama. He didn't get any hands on him. You have to reroute. You have to disrupt the timing, especially when you consider Devontae Smith's speed, especially when you consider down and distance. We all know it was 2nd and 26. His job was to reroute that wide receiver, preferably inside. Now, Devontae did go inside Malcolm Parrish on that play, but there was no reroute. He had a free release. He was able to get to top speed quickly, and obviously his speed combined with Tua's ball placement and accuracy made it near impossible for Dominic Sanders to get there because Tua looked him off. So the blown coverage was at the beginning. Dominic Sanders has to mirror the quarterback within his responsibility of deep half. He did so, and by the time he came back, that lack of a reroute, that lack of contact meant Devontae was free. It was like 7-on-7. There was no press, there was no touch, and obviously it was a great throw by Tua, and I think I give him credit for that. He gets credit for the look-off, he gets credit for the throw and the timing, absolutely, but the blown coverage did aid him, but it wasn't Dominic Sanders. The blown coverage was the corner not disrupting the timing of the route, which, as we saw on that play, was everything. Tua did have some pressure, and Dominic was fairly solid and true to his position. Should that reroute have occurred and Tua throw that same ball, I think that extra millisecond, half a second, gives Sanders enough time to get to Smith for more of a 50-50 ball instead of the easy-looking touchdown that won Bama the Natty. The plays where I don't give Tua as much credit as that are, the scramble, the touchdown to Calvin Ridley, which I think was intended for Najee Harris, throwing off of his back foot on 4th down. The lack of fundamentals and misreads that he had were where I was critical of him. And I wasn't critical of him in general. Obviously, he played a great game. They won the game. But I think there's a certain contingent of Alabama fans that think he went out there and played perfect football, which was not the case. It should have been more of a 1 touchdown, 2 interception type performance, or 2 touchdown, 2 interception type performance, completing near 50% of his passes, which is not terrible, but it's not, heroic. He's the starter no matter what type of football, like some people think. So that's all I was trying to say. But in terms of that last pass, I think he deserves almost all of the credit. Not all of it, because again, there was blown elements of that coverage. But in terms of looking off the safety, delivering the football, that was all Tua. Luke Ferguson with another question here. A lot of respect for Jalen, and he is a true junior. Still has 2 years to keep getting better. Hopefully he gets a full year with Dan Enos. Luke, after the weekend, we'd have to think that's the plan for Jalen, right? He kind of said, hey, I'm close to graduating in December. Why in the world would I leave? So regardless of his on-field situation in games, it looks like he will get that full football season with a quarterback coach in Dan Enos. So obviously practice time, all of that going to be very critical for Jalen Hurts as well as all of the quarterbacks. So Luke, I think he gets that full year under Dan, and we'll see after that. But the good news, I guess, is Jalen promptly ended the speculation of any premature transfers, I guess. There's not going to be a Blake Barnett situation here where early in the season he's gone. This is going to be no matter what happens during the year, Jalen will be there in some capacity, and everything will be reevaluated, obviously, after the season, just like every kid does, at least to some degree. Remember, scholarships are year by year. They're not all encompassing 4-year deals. So just something else to keep in mind. And then finally here on Twitter, we'll get to one more. Devin Muhammad tweets in the show at CABC Pod. Love the show. Been a listener since the beginning. If you had to make a coaching staff from Bama's current class, who and why would you choose? This is fun, Devin. I like these kinds of, or Devin or Devon. I'm not sure the pronunciation there. I love these kind of questions because it's kind of a hypothetical. It's kind of fun outside the box, and I could use some outside the box with all that is going on right now in Alabama football. All right, so we're constructing a class, so we need, or a coaching staff. So we need a head coach, OC, DC, and maybe a couple of position coaches. We'll kind of leave it fairly generic for now. All right, head coach, based on this Alabama class, I'm going to go Pierce Quick. Guy is a natural leader. He has an eccentric personality. People gravitate towards Pierce. I've been around him for several years now, and he's a kid that you don't mind being around. I think he will have enough street cred to be authoritarian, if that makes sense. Obviously, these are all kids, so it's relative. However, among the commits, he's a known guy. People respect him kind of off rip, and then he can build the trust from there. Speaks well, articulate, smart, and can hold his own in a lot of elements. And I think those are some good makings for a head coach. With the offensive coordinator spot, this is tough. I mean, we got to go to the quarterbacks, right? I mean, do you go Paul Tyson? Do you go to Tua Tagovailoa? Oh, man. Both kids are really smart. Both kids are really productive. But I'll say this. At Alabama, all things even, it seems like it's a little more conservative than wide open offensively. We'll see under Mike Locksley, but typically under Nick Saban, Paul Tyson is more of the type of guy you want as your coordinator. Maybe not as sexy, but a little more conservative and will protect the football. So I'll go with Paul Tyson slightly over Talia Tagovailoa as the offensive coordinator, but Talia could be co-offensive coordinator. So Talia could be the Josh Gaddis of this coaching staff, and they can work together as OCs. For the defensive coordinator spot, this is a good one. I think Shane Lee is a solid pick. He's a middle backer, classic dude, downhill cat, although he covers better than a lot of us thought, as evidenced at the opening. But what's interesting about these young defenders on the commitment list, a lot of them kind of just do their own thing. Rashad Cheney, eccentric personality, versatile football player. Justin Aboigbe, very quiet defensive lineman. You know what? I think Antonio Alfano, who we had on the pod a little while ago, I think he could be the defensive coordinator candidate here. So let me flip that. Give me Alfano as the DC, gritty, aggressive, confident. That's the guy you want at Alabama because you got athletes. You're better at almost every position than everybody you go against. So if you want to match up and send the dogs after the quarterback, you can do it. And I think Alfano has that edge to him to be able to do it, along with the natural talent, the articulation, the communication ability to get it to his defensive subjects. So I'll go Alfano as the DC. Shane Lee will be his co-DC, kind of linebackers coach as well. We'll go Brandon Turnage as the defensive backs coach. DJ Dale as kind of a quiet, reserved D-line coach who's maybe super intense in brief moments. On the offense, we'll go with the O-line. Pierce Quick is the head coach. So coaching the O-line, we'll go with Tanner Bowles for now. Receivers, John Mechie's the only one committed. Keelan Robinson at running back, so he gets that cake as well. So did we miss any? Did we miss any of those position groups? So that's kind of the construct there. Head coach Pierce Quick, coordinators Paul Tyson, Antonio Alfano, with some co-OCs and DCs just to take care of myself in case these kids hear it and say, man, you couldn't make me the DC. No, but that's a good question, Devin. I like that. And obviously, as this class matures, we could have some different candidates, right? If an Akobe Dean joins the class, he's getting one of those top 3 posts, either DC or head coach. Pierce will have a battle there on his hands for the head coaching job. But we'll see. We'll see what Alabama's able to put together to round out the class. So, Devin, do me a favor. In December, ask this question again, and we'll see if we go off of our current hierarchy, if you will. Pierce Quick, head coach, Paul Tyson, OC, and Antonio Alfano, DC. But that will do it for this Monday edition of Crimson and Blue Chips. We got a couple other questions in there, but wanted to wrap up here. We'll get to those on Wednesday. For those who didn't hear your questions answered, please resubmit or submit new questions here on Crimson and Blue Chips, and we'll get to you via Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Gmail, what have you. Remember, we are now on SoundCloud.com, so check us out there if you're looking for more of an audio-only version, and of course right here on YouTube as well. Please subscribe and get CABC Pod before all your friends. Thanks for listening, everybody. God bless. Garcia out.